what was the name of that serial killer that you were talking about earlier? Was that Wayne Gacy?
John Wayne Gacy, the clown
Okay.
guy. Yeah,
And, suddenly that gets into his brain and he becomes a copycat serial killer himself. And which is a common thing that happens where you have copycats of
sure.
of serial killers. And that like I was trying to say, there is an aspect of human nature that I think we often don't want to acknowledge because it freaks us the fuck out. And I think
Mm,
it's rational that it freaks us the fuck out
sure.
that we as animals mimic things that we see culturally in society and in behaviors from people around us. And this is like, this is stuff that you can neurologically back up, and sociologically back up. Um, but on top of that, there are aspects of our personalities that, from very young ages, we imprint stuff that we see around us from the behaviors of our parents, the behaviors of
Sure.
our peers.
Yep.
All these things make this giant gumbo of a person's personality.
Yep.
And what's so difficult is being able to parse between, on the one hand, having mercy and compassion, on the other hand, having the willingness to say, fuck no, right? Like,
Free will. Yeah.
right. Like, that is, I feel like I said this before, but I feel like that is like the topic of our decade because we're trying to figure out how do we participate and behave with each other knowing the animal that we are as human
Right.
beings, right? Because there are just aspects of ourselves that we are not always 100% fully in control of, whether or not
Yeah.
we're aware of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Little unconscious ticks, subconscious things, and they're usually things that aren't a big deal. But sometimes, for some people, it becomes serial killer territory. It becomes genocidal maniac territory. It becomes
Sure.
it becomes, rapists or abuser or all these other things. And my general response to that is we have to figure out how to how to mediate these things through proper mental health, which is, I mean, in our country, it's a little bit tricky, right? In terms of having the money to do it and whatever. Still, there are plenty of people who come into lots of money and lots of power who don't take that in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They don't make the most of that privilege that they have to heal and to change and to grow. And I have a huge appreciation for artists who grow and who I've seen, start from one place and end up in a totally other place.
Sure.
Going back to David Bowie, young David Bowie to old David Bowie, completely different person because he's gone through all these different metamorphoses, and that became part of his overall body of work, right? But
Yeah.
um, I don't know if I have a point beyond that.
Well, I think the real question that we need to get down to is as a society, do we have hard lines of what is forgivable and what is not? I mean, and 9 times out of the ten, um, the thing is forgivable if we choose, if the person is seeking forgiveness and making active attempts to not undo, but to prohibit that from reoccurring, whether it's in
Sure.
themselves or in someone else. Like I know, for example, Kevin Hart, he made some pretty nasty comments on Twitter, which it's debatable whether or not he was trying to tell a joke, but about if his son ever asked for a dollhouse, that he would say, no, that's gay, and then smash a dollhouse over his head. It's debatable whether or not he was trying to be, what's the word I'm looking for here? Offensively comedic or
Yeah.
controversial comedy, kind of like that, or if he was serious. And he apologized for it, and then he had to apologize for it again, and then he got the Oscars, and then people made a big stink about it again, and he had to apologize about it again, and then he stepped down. And I think the problem with it was there was no effort from his point of view other than to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, to undo what he had done by saying that. Do you know what, does that make sense? Like, there needs to be demonstrable, practical, tangible effort on the person who committed the wrongdoing to undo or prevent it from happening again in the future. So you look at an actor like Danny Trejo. Danny Trejo, if I'm not mistaken, was in prison for some pretty horrendous stuff. I might be wrong. I know he was in prison. I'm not entirely sure what for, but I can't tell you anybody who's boycotting Danny Trejo because you know what I mean. Like, he served his time. He went to jail and he doesn't do that thing anymore. You look at someone like Tim Allen, who in the 80s was arrested for being a cocaine dealer, and then the next thing you know, he's Santa Claus. He did his time. So the question is, you know, but then like someone, I'm pretty sure Chris Brown went to jail, but he is still kind of spit on in certain circles amongst people because I think he went to jail, but I don't know. And, you know, he said his apologies, but some people might have felt like he did it because he felt like he had to and not because he was genuinely sorry. So like there's this weird thing where we as a society have to decide what we choose to forgive, when we choose to forgive, how we choose to forgive, what our terms are. And there's got to be room amongst the people who did not commit the crime or whatever it may be, to let the other people that they're next to, so fans, imagine a crowd full of fans. It's that idea that you were talking about where it's absolutism, where one person in that entire stadium says, I don't like this artist because of this. And they look at the person next to them and say, you don't like them either, right? And if the person next to them has said, well, you know, he's donated millions to charity to do that, and he's seen a therapist, and now his work is about helping people in that particular situation that he put other people in, and he's apologized, and even the person that he offended, like physically or assaulted or whatever like that, he's, you know, gotten his apology was accepted by them, like. And the person in the crowd is like, no, I forgive him. And then the person who's still very much against it goes, well, fuck you. Then it's like, well, what are we even doing here? Like, why are you in this stadium? Is it just because you're angry and you want to boycott this? Like, how is that positive? How are you bringing positivity to the movement? So we need to start understanding not just the artist, but the rest of the fandom needs to start communicating with each other and being open-minded in terms of people are going to have that different reaction to how a person grows, how an artist grows.